Yeah, what is Sims the game?
They speak their own language, like Zoopsanor.
Like, do the people die in Sims?
Put them in a room and then sell the door, and then they get stuck in the room, and then they starve to death.
I think we're getting off task a little bit.
Human rights.
Human rights. Didn't we talk about humans earlier?
We did. We talked
Okay.
about human rights before, but I mean, we really focused more on the history
Yeah.
of human rights, right? There's a lot of things happening that led to the creation.
World War II, we talked about that.
The Holocaust.
The Holocaust, recognition of human rights.
So
Okay.
now that human rights are a thing,
Right.
what are they?
Well, I was looking at the UDHR that was, I guess, went out in 1948, and they listed, we had our preamble, and then we had a list of 30 articles that essentially went through it and defined what human rights all people have that are inherent in them and that are inalienable, as in they can't be taken away.
And when we think about the word articles, it's not like an article in a newspaper. It's
Right.
like articles is in
Number
human
one.
right number 1, human right number 2. And then you said that there are 30?
I think there are 30, and some of them have like sub numbers, but yeah, 30.
So like one might be like number 20 and then 20 ABC.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So a fun fact about human rights, the UDHR, is that it is the most translated document in the world.
Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. Honestly, I thought I was just gonna say a fun fact and then move on.
That's a great question. I mean, I thought that something like the Quran or the Bible or
Sure.
like a religious text would be the most translated. But why do I think the UDHR is the most translated? One, I know that many countries are part of the UN.
Right. Many countries part of the UN. And even just on a practical sense, I mean, it's not very long. Right? It's 30 articles. It's like, I don't know, like 20, it's not even 20 pages.
That's a great question.
I mean,
and honestly, I don't think that our answers are the final ones. And so maybe we could leave that up to the viewers.
okay, to find out why is it the most translated document of all time. Okay.
That's a good open-ended question.
Yeah. So, do these articles, are they all saying the same thing, or are they kind of like divided up into different ways, or?
So on the list itself, there's 30, and they don't break them up. It just goes 1 through 30. But while I was reading through it, I don't know, maybe this is just the teacher brain in me, but I was like, I feel like there's a certain pattern
Okay.
to it. Now, this isn't to say that there's an official category 1, category 3. This is just my brain, but I looked at it as there's kind of 2 types of human rights.
Okay, 2 types of human rights.
Now, the first one that I was thinking about was civil and political rights.
Civil and political rights.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So civil and political meaning is one thing, and then another thing would be
The other category, we have civil and political, and then the other category would be economic, social, and cultural rights.
okay. So economic, social, and cultural is one category, and civil and political is another one.
Yes.
Okay. So then, for example, if I read Article 9, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Would that be in 1 or 2?
So, category 1 being that civil and political rights.
Right.
Category 2 being cultural and economic and social rights. Now, you talked about being arrested, right?
Right.
But that's taken away my civil rights, my rights as a citizen.
Okay. So then more like category 1, so
Yeah.
civil and political rights. Whereas, so for example, everyone has the right, number 24, everyone has the right for rest, leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours, holidays, and some holidays with pay.
What do you think about that one? Civil and political, or cultural,
Economic.
economic? Personal?
Personal. For me, I would probably put that under cultural economic, because when I think holidays, when we're talking about holidays in school, we think of cultural holidays and holidays related to my country or my religion. And when I think about leisure, I think about, okay, so stuff that I can do in my free time. And when I think about pay, I also think about my economy. So I'd put that number 2.
That makes sense.
Okay. So what happens if, going back to that other one, what happens if, like, is this the law somewhere? Like, is this the law? Like, can I go to jail? Can somebody else go to jail? Like, what happens if, I don't know, these are broken or not held up, or however you put it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because if we break a law here in the country that we're living in, whether that's United States of America, Canada, Thailand, we've broken that country's laws.
Right.
We go to jail. Whereas this...
Directly to jail?
It depends on the crime.
Okay.
And the country.
Okay.
But whereas if, let's say that you are my boss, and you break one of the human rights, let's say you mentioned the one that right to leisure and play, right? You're like,
Yo, Mr. Watts, you gotta work Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week. And you don't get any time to rest.
Okay.
you've broken that human right.
Uh-huh. Do you have any recourse? Recourse meaning, can you do anything about this?
So the country itself, one of the agreements to be part of the UN is that you try your best as a country to follow this human right.
Oh, so these are goals.
Yes.
These aren't laws that everybody has to follow. The
No.
Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
And the kind of the fact of the matter, and if it's an individual one, it is a little bit harder to kind of gain that momentum and steam. But where these really come into play is when they're purposely and specifically broken in a widespread or systematic way.
Okay.
So if you as a country, so you're no longer my boss, you are now the president, king, emperor, god.
Sure. Or I'm the head of the Department of Employment for country X.
So you have a system
Yeah.
to make this kind of breaking happen.
Yeah.
Then that kind of goes up the flagpole, so to speak. So it goes up to a higher level, and then it's on the radar of the United Nations. The United Nations is a group of countries that come together that have a kind of set agreement for how to do trade and kind of rules for how we treat each other. UDHR. And then that's where this discussion would take place.
Okay. So, but there's no definitive, like, if somebody breaks one of these rules, that this will happen or this will happen.
You go to human rights jail? No.
Okay. So, again, like the UDHR, if we think about it, it's a goal that we're all trying to aspire to as humans. And humans have been humans for what? A long time.
Hundreds of thousands of years, tens of thousands of years.
And civilization's been around for about 10,000 years. Like, people getting together, forming civilization. And even up until 1945, like, we still treated each other pretty terribly around the planet. I mean, America likes to hold itself on a pedestal, but we're coming up here now. This is the year 2020. If you watch this, 2021. If you watch this in the future, on the 35th anniversary of the ML King speech in the United States,
Martin Luther King Jr.
And we're talking, 1968, 1970. 1968 was when he was assassinated. So, even in the United States, 68, 20 some odd years later, after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, people are still fighting in America for their
civil rights.
For their civil rights.
Right, and we kind of talked about that's one of the categories we could put in, those civil and political rights. And so maybe a way to kind of think about it then is it's a common way for countries around the world to think about, use the word aspire or push towards a common agreement for how we shouldn't treat people.
Right.
And then it gives us as people kind of that dignity as humans to know, I have a right to leisure and free time. I have a right to express myself. And that's the first step to being recognized on a larger scale.
I think you got it there. I think that's why it's been translated so many times. Like, because like it gives you and me, like we know that we're talking about the same thing. We're both talking about number 19, okay? And your country in 1945 or 1948 signed on to this that says, you know what, I want to be part of this. We will aspire, we will desire, we will try to push our society in this direction. And my society also said the same thing. We're going to aspire and try to do this. And you know, we've translated this document, and your country agreed to it 50 years ago, and so did my country, and we're both talking about the same thing here, because sometimes we get confused on language, right? So maybe that's why it's been translated so many times, and even more so, like maybe this is why it allows people to be able to talk about something similar. We're talking about this is a pen, and we're talking.
I also call that a pen.
Okay, well, great. Like we want a happy society, and these things seem like a good way to have like happy people in a happy society.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Coupon.
You're welcome. Thanks, Mr. Watts. It's just like class. It's just like class. What are we talking about?